again. This is Doc Rotten from Horror News Radio and Gruesome Magazine. Joining me tonight is the one and only Rafe Telsch. He is here to talk about the theatrical release for this week, Jigsaw. Rafe, how you doing?
Doing all right. That's right. I stepped away from Stranger Things in order to see Jigsaw, so...
I'm not entirely sure you won that bet, but let's see how things go.
I should preface this by saying I had not seen the previous Saw movies. I had seen a couple of them. I had seen 2 and I had seen 4, and on my old podcast we made the joke that I saw every other one. And this past week, in anticipation of Jigsaw, I watched all of the movies in order and realized just what I was missing, that this is really a pretty well-woven tapestry of story going on in the existing 7 movies, which, ended 7 years ago. So here we are 7 years later, and we get a new chapter, and Jigsaw is back, because if it's Halloween, it must be Saw. But, of course, Jigsaw died in Saw 3, so how has it been 10 years since he's dead, and now there's... So here we are 7 years after the last movie, and Jigsaw is back, and... how can that possibly be? Because he dies in one of the earlier chapters. In fact, they make several references to the fact that it's been 10 years since the killer known as Jigsaw died, and we saw that in the movie. And they managed to make 4 other movies without him around, and now we have a new chapter. We have new cops because, of course, most of them were taken care of in the old saga. In fact, the 7 existing movies did a really good job of wrapping up almost all of the loose threads. So it really did become a question of how can this be? And I love that they included that in the trailer. And as usual, we get an answer to that. Unfortunately, it's not a very satisfying answer to me. As a whole, I found Jigsaw to be rather disappointing. They got more creative with traps, although there is somewhat a feeling of been there, done that with a couple of them. They're obviously paying homage to the traps from the older movies, and I like that. I didn't feel like they were repeating themselves, but it also took away some of the thrill of them. It's like we know how this is going to work already. And then a whole new cast that it kind of became hard to get invested in because they weren't around when the Jigsaw murders were going on. They're kind of – the original title of this movie was Saw Legacy, and I almost think they should have kept that because it really is playing with the legacy of what came before. Ultimately, I found this one really disappointing for a couple of reasons. First of all, one of the things I've liked about Jigsaw is he's a very moralistic killer. It's a weird thing that he does, but he has a moral code behind it, and I love the fact that they played with that with him and some of his assistants, that they didn't get it. They didn't understand the morality behind it. They wanted revenge, or they were driven by some other purpose. And here it almost feels like Jigsaw himself has lost that moral code. The other reason I'm not crazy about Jigsaw is that with all of the movies, there's always a play with time. You're not fully aware of when events are taking place in reference to other events until you get to the big finale. And there's a lot of misdirection and misleading the audience in that, which you just come to expect. But I really felt like this was the first time that the narrative out and out lied to the audience, and then they just made up some BS at the end to cover it. I just didn't feel like it was as well crafted a story. I didn't feel like it really belonged with the other movies. And I hope that they're not trying to build a new franchise off of this one. As nice as it was to hear Tobin Bell doing the Jigsaw recordings, again, I just really feel like they've lost their direction. Everything was wrapped up in a nice bow. They had like 2 loose ends in the existing 7 movies. They don't follow either of those. I hope I'm not really spoiling anything by saying that. This is kind of its own thing, but building on what came before, and ultimately it doesn't really build as well as it could have.
Interesting. Now, this is the Spierig Brothers who did films like Undead and I think Daybreakers. How was the direction for this?
The direction's not bad, and I have to admit that I have Undead has been sitting on my shelf for several years, and I still haven't seen it. So I'm not familiar with their previous work. I'm aware of it, but I haven't seen it. The direction's good. The cinematography is good. It just feels empty. It feels like the script just is lacking the oomph that tied all the other movies together.
All right, so it's all about the story. Everything else seems to be in place, though?
Yeah, and in fact, I'd almost say, I find it funny that they went out of their way to make the seventh movie a 3D Saw movie. Like, you can watch it on your regular TV and see where they got those 3D gimmicks, where they worked those in. And then this movie was not done in any sort of 3D. They're not trying that empty gimmick. There was actually a scene in Saw 7 that I felt like the blood was bright pink. And here it looked really good. I mean, the effects are good. The visuals are really well done. It just, for me, it's the story that matters, and that's where it comes up short.
All right, well, let's end this with your score and a favorite scene. Score is 1 through 5.
Score is going to be 2 stars. Just not as impressive. It's probably my least favorite of all of the Saw movies. And my favorite scene, one of the really nice traps is one of the characters attempts to take a shortcut and ends up falling right into a trap because of that. And you see the silo trick in the trailers, and that's connected to him being in this other trap and having to make a choice of what's going on. And it actually plays out really well.
Oh, that sounds good. All right, well, Rafe, thank you for your review. Let's say goodnight.
Good night, everybody.
Be sure to visit GruesomeMagazine.com to listen to the other Gruesome podcasts, Hard News Radio, and Decades of Horror. Also, check out the Gruesome Magazine Quarterly, available in digital and print-on-demand format. Gruesome Magazine.